Jacob, Mirka, hello. How y'all doing? Hey, Jacob. Hi, Mirka. How are you?
Good.
Mirka, were you on the last class last Wednesday or not?
Yes.
Oh, you were. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Just checking. Sorry about the bad link that was up there a minute ago. Hey, David. How are you? Hey, David. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
I am well. Hey, David, we met last week, didn't we?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. It was very good meeting you. Welcome, Mr. Ramali Mason. How you doing today? Y'all, sorry for the bad link earlier. My bad. I don't know what happened. I had an admin person who helps me set that up a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what happened. Oh well. Can y'all hear me okay? Awesome. I'm gonna see if I can pull a couple things up real quick. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. Y'all can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Good. All right. I'm going to pull up the Gracia article. But before I do that, I'm going to check the reading schedule real quick. This week, and it's a short week. Wow, that was weird. But it's a short week. This week, we're discussing the Gracia article, are we not? Am I right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. It looks like this is our only day to do it. So I'm going to try to make this short and sweet and not waste time. Next week, we will discuss the article from Plato, the excerpt from Plato's Republic on the divided line, as well as the excerpt from Aristotle's Metaphysics on theos. Who can tell me what theos means?
It means God.
That's right. It means God. Theos, the Greek word for God. So yeah, that's what we will do next week. We will discuss those two excerpts, okay? Y'all, does anyone have any questions at the moment? How many folks do we have online? 6, 5. It looks like there's some folks who aren't here. Oh, well. But y'all, we are going to discuss this article by Gracia today. And it's a good article. My hope is that this article will just give us some terms and some categories that will help us during the course of the semester. I'm going to just read. So I hope that you've read the article. This is an upper division class. And so it's important that you do the reading. I hope that y'all have at least made an effort to read this article. And as you know, there's an introductory section, and then there's 6 or 7 numbered headings, right? It looks like there's 7 headings, and then a conclusion. So what I want to do is just sort of, I'm going to list those 7 headings real quick, and then we'll circle back around, and I just want to talk through the article, okay? And y'all, I really want to encourage you, if anyone has any questions or comments, you would be a fool not to voice those, okay? This is a small class, which is super awesome from my point of view. And I just really hope that if you have questions, and you will, I mean, you will, that I hope that you will not be shy, okay? So the 7 headings, 7 or 8, I can't remember. Number 1 is faith and reason. That's on the 3rd page. Faith and reason. What is the relationship between faith and reason? And y'all, that is probably not a class. I mean, sorry, that is probably not a topic that you would discuss if this were a class in modern philosophy, but it's a class in medieval philosophy. And so one of the huge issues for the medievals, all of them, Augustine, Aquinas, Bonaventure, all of them, is what is the relationship between faith on the one hand and reason on the other, okay? And it's a huge, vast topic. One of the reasons why I selected that excerpt from Plato's Divided Line is because the first 2 segments on the divided line, or the first 2 moments of the divided line, the second one is pistis. I'm going to put that in the chat. Pistis, which is the Greek word for faith. It can be translated in many ways. Sometimes it can be thought of as opinion. There's other words, but darn, autocorrect, pistis. Can y'all see that? Let me hear you say pistis.
Pistis.
Good. It's the Greek word for faith. Interestingly, it's the second segment in Plato's Divided Line. We'll get to that next week. For now, I'm going to give you the Latin equivalent of pistis, and it's fides. Let me hear you say fides.
Fides.
Good. So Augustine has a famous saying that goes like this: fides quaerens intellectum. Man, autocorrect. Fides intellectum. Fides quaerens. Autocorrect. There we go. Fides quaerens intellectum, which means faith seeking understanding. It's very interesting that most of the medievals are going to say that faith precedes reason. There's various ways of talking about that. But you can see, and by the way, intellectum right there, obviously you probably realize that that's talking about the intellect, but for now, you can just think of that as reason. Are you with me? So faith seeking understanding, faith seeking reason. This is a huge maxim for Saint Augustine, but the point for now, all I'm doing is introducing an idea, is that faith and reason are huge issues for the medievals. The question is, how are they related, right? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Kierkegaardian maxim, a leap of faith. You ever heard that? Kierkegaard talks about
Yeah.
blind leap of faith. And that's a very modern way of understanding faith, because in that maxim, in that formula, a leap of faith, it's a blind leap of faith. The idea there in Kierkegaard's context is that faith and reason are sort of opposites. They're contradictory. They stand in tension. If you're a man of faith, then you're not a man of reason. If you're a person of reason, then you're not a person of faith, right? And that's a common assumption. Certainly there's people today that think that faith and reason are opposites. But did Augustine think that faith and reason are opposites? Augustine, who said, faith seeking understanding, fides quaerens intellectum? No. Augustine thinks that faith seeks reason. Faith seeks understanding. Faith is something that pursues rationality. Okay, so are you with me so far? I'm trying to say that for the medievals, faith and reason are not opposites, but they go together in some sense. And we'll come back to this over and over again. But am I making sense so far?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions, comments about this so far? It's the first heading in the Gracia article, and with good reason, because it's a huge topic, right?
And actually, I had a question about this.
Go ahead. Who's talking?
Oh, this is David.
Hey, David.
I was wondering if he's talking about faith, as in like belief in God. So like believe and then you'll understand, is like that kind of idea?
You're wondering if that's what Gracia has in mind?
Or Augustine, actually. So
Oh,
is he
Augustine.
saying that you have to believe in God first, and then after that you're free to reason?
Basically, yes. Basically, yes. I mean, I wouldn't want to hold his feet to the fire excessively. There are certain ways in which, even for Augustine, reason is prior to faith, but there's a huge sense for him in which faith is prior to reason. And if your question is that talking about faith in the God of the Bible? The answer is yes. Does that help, David?
Yeah, definitely. I was just wondering if it's like faith in general, like the idea that reason is like based on assumptions we can't prove.
Yeah, no, he's going to be talking about faith in God there. Cool? Thank you for that, David. And again, like, I don't really want you guys to know what I think about things. I want you to know what Augustine thinks about things. I want you to know what Thomas Aquinas thinks about things. I want you to know what Saint Bonaventure thinks about things. You know what I mean? So yeah, clearly when Augustine says that the Christian life, because this is the statement, is that the Christian life is a pilgrimage. I'll write the whole thing out. The Christian life is and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the Christian life is a pilgrimage of faith-seeking understanding. Okay, that's the quote. And that's the quote. And you can see that those last three words is fides quaerens intellectum, right? Does that make sense? The Christian life is a pilgrimage of fides quaerens intellectum, faith-seeking understanding, okay? And yeah, that's he's talking about the Christian God. Faith in the Christian God. Is that cool, David?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Interestingly, one of the reasons that's a good question is because when we get to Plato and look at what he means by fides, it's not faith in the Christian God. What is it? Well, we'll get there next week. Okay. But y'all, let's just mention the second big topic that I hope that you read. And I'm just going to list these topics, then we're going to try to circle back around and go through them. Oops, I skipped something. God's existence. Y'all give me one sec here. I want to see if I took notes on this real quick. Hang on. Can you still see my desktop?
Yes.
Good. Did I take notes on this? I don't think I did. Oh yeah, I did. Very brief ones. Oh yeah. Oops. Okay. So the second heading is God's existence. Again, this is what Aristotle's metaphysics is about. I mean, Aristotle says that God is the unmoved mover, and he also says that God is being itself. Or I'm gonna share a weird phrase that philosophers use a lot, and it's the phrase being qua being. Where did my chat go? You'll hear philosophers talk this way a lot. Being qua being. That, what does that mean? That means being as such. So let me I'm going to give you a very brief primer, brief primer in thinking about genus and species. Okay, genus and species. So it would be possible to talk about a cat as a mammal, right? I mean, if you and I could have a conversation, or I could give a lecture, or a zoologist could give a lecture on cat as a mammal, right? Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see how that the word cat is a class, right? I mean, if we talk about cats, we're not talking about this cat or that cat, or my cat named Gilbert, or my other cat named Dorothy. We're talking about cats, right? More than one. It's a group, it's a class. It is a genus. Are you with me so far? So when I say genus, that's not a particular. If you and I have a conversation about cups, C-U-P-S, that's very different from talking about this particular cup or this particular cup. Are you with me? Now, this is going to come up again later in one of the later sections where he talks about universals. Universals, that's on page 8. But you see, we can talk about a cat as a mammal, or cats as mammals, without talking about any particular cat. But we can also talk about cats as cats, or mammals as mammals. Are you with me so far? See, if we talk about mammals as mammals, what Aristotle would say is we're talking about mammals qua mammals. If we talk about cats as cats, not cats as mammals, but cats as cats, we're talking about cats qua cats. Are you with me so far? And Aristotle uses a phrase in the Metaphysics that's very, very famous. He says that he's talking about being qua being. And the question is, what does that mean? What does that mean? And some people, there's really two big camps in the history of philosophy. Some people, and I'll call them the bad guys. Okay, now I am telling you what I think. The bad guys think that Aristotle is talking about being as such, or just, or what you could call generic being, generic being. Other people, and I'll call them the good guys, say that Aristotle's talking about God, AKA the unmoved mover. Now, by the way, no one denies that Aristotle is talking about God in the Metaphysics. The question is, when he uses this phrase, being qua being, is he talking about God there, or is he talking about something else called generic being? Does that make sense? Now, in section 2, Gracia is trying to introduce us to the topic of God's existence, right? And we're not going to go into it now. We're not going to go super deep into it right now, but let me just say, let me just say this. I would encourage you to ask the question, what is existence? and what do the medievals mean by existence? Because you see, existence, whatever existence is, let me give you some things that existence is not, okay? Here's one thing that existence is not. Existence is not goodness, okay? Now, the medievals would say that God is good, but in this section right here in the Gracia article, he's not talking about God's goodness. He's talking about God's existence, okay? What else? So you see, all I'm trying to do right now is to get y'all to ask the question, what is existence? See, a lot of people have thought that the best way to think about God is that God is beyond being, that God is beyond existence. Raise your hand if you know what the word idolatry is. What is the word? Who can tell me what the word idolatry means? Who can tell me what the word idolatry means?
Is it the worship of like idols?
Yes, the word, yes. And what is an idol, Mason?
A representation of divinity?
That's right, a representation of divinity or a representation of God. Now, y'all, remember, I don't really care if you're an atheist. I don't really care if you're a devout Christian or a Baptist. Like, I don't really care about that stuff right now. But I want you to understand the way medieval thought works, okay? And that's why it's important to understand this stuff. See, a lot of people have worried that if we talk about God existing, that's actually idolatrous. Now, why in the world would anyone say that it's idolatrous to talk about God existing?
Maybe
Why
because, sorry, maybe it's because existing is like considered kind of like a human term, or, you know, it's like too low for God somehow.
exactly, a human term or maybe a creaturely term, right? I mean, because it's not limited to humans, David. It would also include things like rocks and frogs and trees, right? Are you with me, David?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so that's exactly right, David. Some people have worried that if we talk about God as existing, it kind of makes God out to be a creature. It kind of makes it seem like God is a creature. Whereas these people would say, but God is not a creature. God is beyond all of that. Did we talk about the meaning of the word metaphysics last week? Did we talk about the etymology of the word metaphysics last week?
I think so.
Who can tell me what the Greek word physics means? I guess we didn't talk about it. It means nature, okay? So Aristotle wrote a book called The Physics. Aristotle wrote a book called The Physics. Can y'all see that? Aristotle's Physics. Aristotle wrote a book called The Physics. What does he mean by physics, or the Greek word physios? Physios. He means nature, right? That he doesn't mean like, he means nature. He means things that move, trees, frogs, squirrels, also the four elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. Do they move? Yeah, they do in Aristotle's mind, because earth goes down, fire goes up, etc. So nature is the realm of things that move. That includes growth and decay, and that's physios for Aristotle. But in the metaphysics, he's not talking about physios. He's not talking about nature. He's talking that which is beyond nature. Did you hear that? Beyond. See, God is beyond nature. The question, does that mean that God is also beyond being or existence? Maybe. Some people have said it does. So you see, all I'm trying to say right now is that this is a big issue. Does God exist? I mean, we know that rocks exist. We know that galaxies exist. We know that Jacob Levels exists, but does God exist? That's a big question for the medievals. And most of them are going to say yes, but it's important to try to understand what they mean by that, okay? Also, I said a minute ago that existence is like, in order to know what existence is, it's helpful to sort of ask the question, what is it not? Okay. And and one of the things that existence is not is what? I already said it. What did I already say existence is not?
Goodness.
That's right. It's not goodness. It's not beauty. That's another thing that it's not. It's not unity. And it's not truth. So real quick, Thomas Aquinas speaks of the transcendentals. The transcendentals. By the way, y'all, whenever I write stuff in the chat like this, a lot of times these are great like research topics, paper topics, and stuff like that. Thomas Aquinas speaks of the transcendentals. What are the transcendentals? They're goodness, truth, beauty, but also existence and unity. And Thomas Aquinas says that all of those are characteristics of God, and they're all related, but they're also all different. So you see, existence or being, and those are the same thing. When I say existence, that's the same thing as being, okay? Existence slash being is not beauty, it's not truth, it's not goodness. It might be related to those things, but it's still different from those things. Here's another thing that being is not. Essence. 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 Okay, what is essence? Well, here's a quick nifty way of understanding what Aristotle means by essence. He's talking about the definition of something in a philosophically airtight dictionary. So he's talking about a rigorous, accurate philosophical definition of something. So who can tell me what Aristotle's definition of human being is?
Rational animal.
Rational animal. And Aristotle would say that that is a philosophically airtight definition of the human being. Now, notice that that definition does not define animal. You'd have to look that word up separately in the philosophically airtight dictionary. Are you with me? But Aristotle would say that it is accurate to say that the human being is a rational animal. Guess what, y'all? That is our essence. For Aristotle, that is the essence of what it means to be a human being. What does it mean to be a human being? It means to be a rational animal. That is the essence of man. That is the essence of the human being. But notice, and let me just ask you a question. Is it theoretically possible to have the essence of something without the existence of that thing? In other words, we've just defined, let me ask it to you this way. We've just defined the human being as rational animal, right? Let me ask you guys a question. Does it follow from that definition? And Mirka, I would love for you to take a stab at this. Are you with me, Mirka?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Awesome, no worries. Mirka, do you understand we just defined the human being as rational animal, right?
Yeah.
And we've said that that is the essence of the human being, right?
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that it necessarily follows from that definition that human beings actually exist.
I,
It-
yes.
It's a weird question. It's a weird question, but I wanted you to think about it.
I feel like it's kind of confusing though, because
Yes.
I mean, you know somebody existed in the past, but you can't see them because they're dead.
Okay, but listen, we're not talking about the past. We're not talking about what you might remember. We're talking about the definition rational animal. That's all we're talking about right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the question is, and this is what it means to think philosophically. You have to be very specific and rigorous and disciplined, okay? Does it follow from the definition man is a rational animal that human beings necessarily exist?
Yes. I mean,
You're awesome, Mirka. Now, who agrees with Mirka? I'm gonna disagree with Mirka, even though she got major like class participation points for answering. Good job. Y'all, I want to suggest to you, and I'm not suggesting, I'm actually just stating that it doesn't follow from the essence of something that it actually exists. You can have, you can define. I could invent a new shape. Let's call it or a new object. Let's call it a yazzle cadoodle, and I can invent a definition for it. But does that mean that object necessarily exists? Yes or no? It doesn't. You know why? It's because the essence of something is not the same as its existence. See, essence and existence are two different things. It's one thing for Mirka to be a rational animal. It's another thing for her actually to exist. Are you with me?
Yes.
It's
Could
crazy.
could I like give the opposite so like in the example of like shapes, we could make up a shape with a bunch of like in angles, like a triangle that has 360 degrees, but
Or
that is
361.
yeah, that wouldn't make any sense. That would be an illogical definition and not an essence. But if we said that we thought of a triangle that had 180 degrees, a perfect triangle, it would exist because its essence, the definition would be logical, that it could be materially actualized in the world.
Mason, awesome. But are you not talking about possibility right now? I think you're saying that if the definition of a shape is not contradictory, it's possible for it to exist. Right?
But I mean, things could exist but never become actualized, though.
Okay, well, for now, existence means actualized existence.
Okay.
Okay? Because, yeah, and listen, I like what you were saying about the 360 degrees or 361 degrees. That's a contradictory definition, right? And so it follows from that, maybe, that shape necessarily does not exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on that. But assuming that an essence is coherent, the question on the table right now is, does the essence necessarily prove that the thing exists? And I'm trying to say no. Yes, Jacob. Jacob, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you either.
Jacob, you can hear me, right? Okay, cool. There's FYI, there's a weird static thing. Cool. Go ahead and leave and come back. y'all, while he's gone, I just want to spit this out because this is I want to throw down one more bombshell, and then we're going to move on. Hey, Jacob.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's happened in the past. I haven't figured out why that happens.
Cool.
I was just going to ask, have we defined existence yet? We just said it's not these other things, but have we defined it?
We haven't defined it, and we're not going to define it, and it might not even be definable. That's that would be one brutally intense way of sort of grasping the point. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that there is no definition for it, but that's kind of the point, is that, like, it's almost as if you can define everything else. You can define frogs, you can define triangles. There can be a definition for human beings. There can be a definition for presidential inaugurations. But when it comes to being, it's like radically different from all of those definitions.
I have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
So if existence is undefinable, how is it possible to differentiate non-existing things from existing things? It seems
By
like
the
that
way,
presupposes a definition.
I'm not really like sticking my head out and saying, committing to the idea that existence is not definable. That's not, certainly not my point. My point is not that it's not that it's not definable. So, David, yeah, could we bracket that question?
Yeah, no, of course. I was just curious about that.
Thank you for asking it. We need to move slowly here. We need we need to use training wheels, or those floaties that little kids use when they're learning to swim. I'm not insisting or even committing myself to saying that there is no definition for existence. That's not the point. For now, I'm trying to get you to see that the essence of something, that is to say its definition, is different from the thing actually existing, or from the existence of the thing. I mean, Mason, you can make up some weird shape, right? A polygon with 19 degrees, and three of them have angles that are 5 degrees, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do something like that, I think. But it doesn't necessarily mean that thing exists. It might mean that it possibly exists. And the point is that existence, the existence of a thing is different from the essence of a thing. Like, I could be thinking of a cisgender female who has 3 arms, 1 eye, 1 green eye and 1 brown eye, whose name is Peggy. Okay. And we could spin out a definition of that. Does it follow from that definition that this person necessarily exists? No. It follows that person possibly exists, but it doesn't follow that she actually exists. And the point that I'm wanting you to wrap your mind around, because I'm assuming that y'all have never thought about this. It took me a long time to really start to see these issues. But what I want you to see right now is that is that the existence of a thing is different from the definition / essence of a thing. And I want you to know what essence is. Essence is the definition of a thing, okay? Now, y'all, before we move on, I want to throw out one more bombshell, and I'm going to try to keep it short. And then we're going to move on to the next heading. And the bombshell is this. Everything I just said about existence being different from essence does not apply to God. For the medievals. What the medievals think, and in a way, this is the whole point, is that for God, God's existence is his essence. Okay? Now, this is something that that I think that you're probably just going to have to meditate on and think about and sit with and come back to. But I want to say, I want to say that again, and then I want to throw out two implications. For God, existence is essence, unlike any other creature. What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. Two things. Number one, it means that God exists necessarily. Now, let me ask you a question. Does Jacob's grandma exist necessarily? Yes or no? No. Jacob's grandma exists contingently. Contingently. See, the opposite of necessary existence is contingent existence. And one of the things that it means to say that God's existence is his essence, one of the things that it means to say that is that God exists necessarily, not contingently. Jacob's grandma exists contingently. What does that mean? It means that she might, it could have been the case that she didn't exist. There's nothing about Jacob's grandma that means that she must exist. But there is something about God for the medievals that means that he must exist. When I say he, trust me, I don't think that God is literally a male. God does not have a Y chromosome. God does not have a penis. But I still am going to use he to talk about God sometimes, okay? So, see, one of the implications of the fact that God's existence is God's essence is that God exists necessarily. God does not exist contingently like anything in the world. All of the things in the world exist contingently. But not God for the medievals. For God, he necessarily exists, and his necessary existence follows from the fact that his existence is identical to his essence. There's one other, I want to say one other thing about this, and then we're going to move on, okay? Y'all, in my intro class, for those of you who've had it, I did and do talk about the simplicity of God. You see that in the chat, the simplicity of God. What does it mean to say that God is simple? Well, it means that when it comes to God, we have to invoke a string of negations. A string of negations. In other words, like this: God is not spatially extended. God does not change. God, do you hear the nots? Not. God is not this, God is not that, God is not this, God is not that. That's a string of negations. God is not spatially extended. God does not change. God is not composed of parts and wholes, etc., etc., etc. That is called the simplicity of God. And y'all, it's connected to the fact that for God, identity is essence. I'm going to stop talking about this now. I hope that I'm being a responsible teacher and not like, I don't know, giving you too much or causing you to drown. I just want you to begin to chew on these things. Who can remind me of the first topic that Gracia throws out?
Faith and reason.
Good. And a modern philosopher might say something like, oh, that's kind of an epistemological thing. Okay, whatever. The second topic is God's existence. And a modern philosopher might say something like, oh, that's an ontological thing or a metaphysical thing. Okay. Now, Mirka, do you know what the word epistemology means? Do you see it in the chat right there?
Yes.
Epistemology is the discipline, the philosophical discipline of justifying how we know what we know. Does that make sense? Justifying how we know what we know, if we know anything at all. Do you see that in the chat, Mirka?
Yes.
That's epistemology. Epistemology is how do we know anything? And if so, what? And how do we know what we know? That's epistemology, okay? The Greek word for knowledge or science is episteme. Class, let me hear you say episteme.
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 Episteme, that's where we get the word epistemology. And a modern philosopher might look at Gracia's first section on faith and reason and be like, oh yeah, that's an epistemology thing. Okay, fine. A modern philosopher might look at the second section, God's existence, and be like, oh, that's an ontological or a metaphysical thing. Okay, fine. Let's go to the third section. The names of God, the names of God. Okay, y'all, there's a lot here. The names of God. What do I want to say about this? I think I'll read the first paragraph. Showing that we can know God was as important to the medievals as proving that he exists. Indeed, because the latter implies knowing something about God, one might say that the task of showing that we can know God logically precedes the task of proving that he exists. But y'all, in order to know God, we have to have language to talk about God. Let me repeat that, or I'll write it in the chat. To know God, or to know that God exists, or to know anything about God, requires that we have a language in which to, or with which to think about God. You see that? To know God, to know that God exists, or to know anything about God requires that we have a language to think about God. Now, do you remember a moment ago in the last section, I was implying that God is not a thing in the world, okay? At least for Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and Augustine, actually. So, in my intro class, I talk about Thanos from the Avengers. Is it the Avengers or Guardians of the Galaxy? I can never remember.
He's in both.
Both. Okay. So Thanos is a super strong dude, right? I mean, he can snap his fingers if he has the glove on and destroy 50% of all living organisms or whatever. Thanos is a strong dude, right? But Thanos, at the end of the day, is a creature. Thanos is a thing in the world. He's just big. He's just the biggest thing around, the strongest, the scariest, the meanest, right? But he's still a thing. Like, put it like this, Thanos is not infinite, right? I mean, he can only bench press 2,000 pounds. He can't bench press an infinite number of pounds, and nor he's only like 20 feet tall. He's not an infinite number of feet tall. Thanos is a mere thing, but God is not that. God is not a mere thing in the world. God is beyond thinghood for someone like Thomas Aquinas. The way that a modern liberal theologian named Paul Tillich, I'm not a huge fan of Paul Tillich, but he did say one cool thing. He said that God is the ground of being. God is the ground of being. Can you see how the ground of being, whatever that means, it's different from a tree. God is the source of all being. God is not merely a being. Thanos is, but God is not. Are you with me? So y'all, what that means is that talking about God is funky, right? I mean, talking about a tree or a quasar or a book or an iPhone is not funky. We know what those things are. We have definitions for those things, but we do not have a definition for God. Thomas Aquinas literally says, and I'm going to write this in the chat, we do not know what God is, only what God is not. And y'all, that is called negative theology or apophatic theology. Do you remember that string of negations? God does not change. God is not composed of parts and wholes. That is called negative theology. And that's what Thomas is relying on, Thomas Aquinas, when he says that we do not know what God is, only what God is not. And so y'all, the point is, how can we know God if we can't talk about him? See, talking about God is problematic. It's funky. So it's an issue, okay? And whenever Gracia talks about the names of God, you could also just, that's tantamount to words for God or language about God, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean a proper name like Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. It could be Most High God. It could be necessary being. It could be, there's lots of different language formulas for God. Okay, but this is the issue in this section, and Gracia is right to bring this out. Now, y'all, do you have any questions for me right now? I'm hoping that you read these sections. Does anyone have any questions for me right now? Now, let me say this. Some of y'all might be scared to death because, I don't know, it may be that you're like, holy shit, I'm in way over my head. Okay. Please understand that I'm a pretty easy grader and I'm a very nice person. Actually, I'm not nice, I'm kind. I'm kind. And what that means is that if this is a struggle for you, I would encourage you to hang with me. I don't think that it's going to require 40 hours a week for you to make an A or B in this class. It might require 10. Or 15. I don't know. If you try, you'll be fine. But I need you to try. It's not easy. Okay. Let's go to the next section. I'm going to do the next section super quick because I've kind of already done it. Theology and metaphysics. The question is, you know what you could do is you could take a pen and write underneath theology, God, and under metaphysics, being. See, the question is theology metaphysics, AKA, is God being? Are those the same thing or are those different things? Okay. Let me tell you real quick, Martin Heidegger and the tradition in which he stands says that they're different things. Of course, Heidegger's an atheist, so he doesn't believe in God. But Martin Heidegger is relying on previous thinkers in the Western tradition, for example, a guy named Suarez, who say that being is not God, being is generic being. Y'all remember how I talked about genus and species? What Suarez and then Heidegger and lots of people in between, what they say is that it's coherent to talk about being as if it's just the most general thing that exists. So let me ask you a question, class. Which is more generic, mammal or cat?
Mammal.
That's right. So you've got mammal and then cat, and then you can keep going up. You can living organisms. Which is more general, living organism or mammal?
living organism.
Right. And you could go all the way up until, in Suarez's opinion, you get to this thing called being. And all being is like the largest, most general category. So on that view, theology and metaphysics are different. On that view, God and being are different. It makes sense to talk about being while forgetting about God. Other people, and they're the ones that I said are the good guys, say, oh, no. What we mean by being is God. So it makes no sense to talk about being without talking about God. All right? But this is what this section is about: theology and metaphysics. Are they the same thing? Is their object the same, or is their object different? Y'all, what is the object of mathematics?
Numbers.
Good. And in the same way, the object of metaphysics is God, and the object, is being. The object of metaphysics is being, and the object of theology is God. See, mathematics and theology and metaphysics are all disciplines, all right? Let me hear you say disciplines.
Disciplines.
Disciplines, they are fields of study, and every field of study has an object. The object of mathematics is numbers. The object of theology is God. The object of biology is life. The object of metaphysics is being. All right. So the question is theology and metaphysics, is that the same? Are those the same discipline? Which is also to say, do they have the same object? In other words, is theology's object identical to metaphysics' object? In other words, are being and God identical? Okay, that's what this section's talking about. Now, let's go to the next section, how we know. And y'all, I'm gonna talk for 3 more minutes. I'm actually gonna skip section 5, how we know, except to say that he does talk about Augustine, because remember, if you had my intro class, you should remember this. Augustine thinks that actually, and he's a good Platonist in this way, that we don't actually learn new things, we just remember things. We remember things. So for Augustine, coming to know God is really a matter of remembering God. Augustine thinks that God is deep down inside of us, and what it means to come to know God is to recollect that which is already in us, okay? So Gracia talks about that. Yeah, and that what I just said about Augustine is related to something else, which I'm going to put in the chat, called divine illumination theory. Divine illumination theory. Augustine believes in something called divine illumination theory. And again, a modern philosopher would say, oh yeah, that's an epistemological thing. That's talking about how do we know what we know? Well, Augustine and other Platonists or Neoplatonists think that we know things by being illuminated. Human knowledge is a matter of light. What does that mean? We'll talk about that more. Let's go to the next section, universals. And I'm going to stop with this. I'm going to stop with this one because, y'all, the last section, individuation, is very closely related to universals. Individuation is talking about individuals like this particular cup or my particular cat named Gilbert. Are you with me? My particular wife named Bouquet. That's individuation, specific items, things that consist of form and matter. Form and matter. We'll talk about that later, okay? That's individuation. But universals, section 6 on page 8, that's not talking about specific items that you can touch and point to. No, it's talking about classes or general terms or concepts. Let me ask you a question. Would you agree with me that there is such a thing as the concept of a frog? Do you agree with me about that?
Yes.
Good. Now, that's closely related to the definition of a frog. A concept is kind of like a definition. But would you agree with me that the concept of a frog is different from an actual frog that you can hold and that might pee on your hand? Would you agree with me that those are two different things?
Yes.
Yeah. So y'all, the frog is an individual. Aristotle would call it a concrete particular. A concrete particular of form and matter. But a concept, a frog, the concept frog, is not an individual. It's universal. You might think of it like this. It's an umbrella term that applies to all frogs, not this or that frog, all frogs. It's universal. Does that make sense? All words, all concepts are universal. They all apply to more than one particular. Okay? Guess what another word for universal is?
Abstract.
That's a good guess. Who said that?
David.
I like that, David. You know what? I like your answer so much. I'm just going to say yes. Yes. But there's another word I was looking for. I put it in the chat. Catholic. Catholic means universal. The Catholic Church isn't talking about this congregation or that congregation. It's talking about all of them. The universe of churches, the universe of Christian doctrines, the universe of traditions and practices and beliefs. Okay? The word Catholic means universal. It's the opposite of an individual. It's the opposite of a concrete particular. And y'all, I'm done. We're done. Y'all, does anyone have a burning desire to ask a question or make
Did
a
we
comment?
sign up for the presentation or whatever?
Yes. I want you, thank you, Jacob. I totally forgot about that. I hope that y'all saw my little essay guide. I wish I would have talked about that at the beginning of class, but I totally forgot. We could do that at the beginning of next class, but I want someone to remind me. I need y'all to send me an email. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to send me an email with the thinker that you would like to write your paper on and any scheduling constraints that you have. Does that work? So for example, if Mason emails me and says, I want to write my paper on Aquinas, I'm going to say, okay, I want you to present on the week of March 22nd. Okay. And if Mirka says, I want to write my paper on Augustine, I'm going to say, great. I want you to present. Can you present during the week of February 1?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So Mirka, if that's what you want to do, just send me an email. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I need y'all to do. I need everyone to send me an email telling me what thinker you want to write your paper on and any scheduling constraints for the purposes of the presentation. Okay. And if you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, but that's it. That's it for me. Okay. Read the Plato excerpt, read the Aristotle excerpt. They're very short. I will probably open the next class by going back over the Gracia essay. We'll see what happens. But y'all have a good weekend, okay?
Thank you.
Yes, going once, going twice. Peace out.